What's going on YouTube? So we first sampled this all-new Seltos at a press event in Texas back in February. However, that was the fully loaded SX example, and we didn't really get to spend a ton of time with it. So with that said, today what we wanted to do was come out and sample what is probably the best value in the Seltos lineup, this S trim. Now this does sticker in at the same base price as the base LX trim level. So let's go ahead and see if this is the Seltos trim to buy. Alright, so kicking things off here with the exterior design. Up in the front here, I have to say, it definitely looks a lot alike to that SX trim level we sampled earlier in the year. So you've got that same typical tiger nose Kia grille with the black in the inside and this textured aluminum looking trim on the outside. Additionally, as far as the lighting, you actually have a very nice looking partially LED setup here on this S trim. So you have the cool daytime running light that runs all the way through the grille and all the way out to here. Now as far as the headlights themselves, those are going to be halogen, as well as the turn signal and the fog light. And then finally right here at the bottom, you will have this piece of silver trim which adds to the rugged look, and you have 7.2 inches of ground clearance. And hopping down here to the wheels, even though this S does serve as the dual base trim for the Seltos, you'll still find alloy rims, so there's no hubcaps on any of the Seltoses. These are 17 inches and they've got a nice dark finish. Coming up above that, you've got your all-wheel drive branding. And then as far as your mirrors, they are going to be heated and you have the LED turn signal, but if you want blind spot monitoring, you're going to have to upgrade to a higher trim level.
Alrighty, so before we get around to the rear design of this Seltos, I do want to talk about the different roof color options. So you can actually get a optional black cherry roof or a white roof if you want that two-tone look. So it's really nice to see that Kia hasn't excluded that, even though this is the dual base trim. And then walking around to the rear design itself, you are going to have that nice Seltos design with this chrome trim going through it, intersecting into the taillights, and they are going to be LED starting on the S trim, and then down here at the bottom we also have some more silver trim with some dual fake exhaust outlets, and that is also on the S trim and higher. Now, one of the really nice things about this S trim of the Seltos is that it does go ahead and throw in Kia's DriveWise safety systems that is missing from the LX trim. So that means you're going to have forward emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane keeping assist, and auto high beam headlights. Well guys, that sums up our second go around of the exterior of this Kia Seltos. So now let's go ahead and hop on the inside before we take it out on a spin and see how that 2-liter engine performs.
So every version of the Seltos will come standard with a keyless entry system. However, if you want remote start as well as smart entry, you're going to have to go for the EX or the SX. So of course, to unlock the vehicle, just press the unlock button. And then taking our first look inside of the cabin of the Seltos S. I'm pretty impressed because it looks just about as upscale as the high-end trim level that we were in earlier in the year. Now on the S, you don't have any choices as far as the interior is concerned. So what you're looking at right here is the only option. It's going to be a black interior with seating that is cloth in the middle but does have a leatherette trim around it, as well as blue accent stitching throughout. Turning to the door trim, that has those same materials, so you have a leatherette all through here, blue color contrast stitching, more leatherette that runs through the top part, and then finally at the very top, this will be hard touch. As far as your windows, it's going to be auto down for the driver only. And then checking out the seats themselves, since this is the dual base trim, as you'd expect, it does have a 6-way manual adjusting seat. Power seats come on the higher end trims. And like I was already mentioning, we have a seat that is mostly cloth, but it does have the leatherette around it as well as on the headrest. and I think it has a very nice look to it. So I kind of already mentioned it, but like I was saying, the materials really don't change a whole lot for this lower end trim versus the SX. So across your upper dash, you'll still find a hard touch plastic as expected for this class. Down here in the middle, this is exclusive to the S, you have this blue texturized plastic trim. And then of course your lower areas, once again, this is a subcompact crossover, so of course it will be hard touch, but everything feels very solid. Now you will have to upgrade for a higher end trim if you want push button start, but as far as this S, just stick the key in to start it. And once it fires up, you'll be looking at the typical Kia analog setup. This display right here in the middle is just a basic 3.5-inch display, but it does contain all the information you would expect to see. And then coming back to the steering wheel itself, I am happy to report we actually have a leather wrap steering wheel, which has a really nice and smooth feeling leather trim. This is the latest Kia design, so you have the upgraded buttons. And then of course, as you would expect, it is manual tilt and telescoping, and heating is not going to be available on any of the trim levels. Now the next thing to get into is going to be the storage. And I am quite impressed since this is a subcompact crossover after all. So opening up the center console here, this is roughly the same size as it is in Mason's Elantra. It is quite deep as well with a felt lining. And when we put it to the real test, we can stick our Burger King coupons in there simply by folding them in half, and we have plenty of space for a bunch of them. Now up in front of that we have two cup holders, and then I really like the amount of space up here. We have a nice deep bin, good for anything. We also have a shelf up here, which would definitely be a great spot to stick a phone with your USB port and two 12-volt outlets below it. And then off to the side we even have a little grab handle, which kind of harkens back to the Telluride influence inside of this Seltos. Now coming back to the shifter itself, of course this is a traditional shifter, so you pull back for drive, bump to the left if you want to do some manual simulated shifting, but there will not be paddle shifters on any trim level. And then heading into reverse, you will find a standard backup camera, but I am happy to report that it does have active trajectory, which is not really expected at this price point. Now on all the trim levels until you get to the SX, you have the traditional handbrake. I am also happy to report that we have 3-stage heated seats even on this S, which is the same price as the base LX. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on up here. Of course, what you're looking at is going to be a manual climate control setup. This is what's standard on the lower 2 trim levels. And you just adjust the temperature like that, change your zones, and your fan speeds right there. Now up above that, we have our audio system. This comes standard with a 6-speaker sound system, so let's go ahead and take a sample of that. I have to say I'm pretty impressed by the sound system. Definitely has a nice full sound even though it is the base system. Okay, so now that brings us here to the main display. What you're looking at is the 8-inch display. This is standard on pretty much every trim of the Seltos except for the top end SX. Now the nice thing is that Kia does include standard CarPlay and Android Auto across the board no matter what screen size you get, but you will have to get the big screen with the SX if you want to have the integrated navigation system. Now moving on up here, we have an auto dimming mirror with built-in HomeLink universal remotes. And then up top here, we will not find a moonroof. Of course, you really don't expect to see one at this price point.
Alrighty, so getting into the Seltos' rear seat. As I said in the review just a couple months ago, this is definitely a really spacious offering for the class. As far as your legroom figures, they're going to come in at 38 inches of both leg and headroom, which is larger than most of the rivals. And as far as behind your seating position, I have probably 4 or 5 inches of your legroom. My feet can easily slide up underneath the seat, so this is definitely a very comfortable offering for this segment. Now, as far as your feature set, this S trim is going to miss out on most of the features that are offered on the Seltos, so you're not going to have any vents, and you're also not going to have the outlets that would be included on the EX trim. Now, you will still have a fold-down armrest with cup holders inside, which is a nice touch, but overall, definitely a really good rear seat. So walking up to the Seltos' tailgate, it is going to be manual on all of the trim levels, as you would expect. And as far as the amount of space you have back here, once again, a very impressive offering for this class. It's larger than most, coming in at 27 cubic feet behind the second row seats, and that will actually expand to 63 cubic feet if you fold them. So like I mentioned, a lot larger than most of the rivals, so that's definitely a benefit. And along your floor, you do have a nice carpeting, and if you lift it up, you do have a spare tire, and you probably could actually fit a little bit of stuff around it. And then in order to fold the seats, they do fold 60-40 split. So just lift, push up, and it will fold right down. Now over here at the passenger seat, of course, as you would expect, it is going to be manually adjusting. And in front of the passenger, we do have a good sized glove box. It's pretty decently sized. It's definitely big enough to fit a pretty healthy stack of coupons, so you'll definitely be happy about that. And up top, we do have a sun visor with a mirror. However, you are missing the light, and it does detach. However, it does not extend.
All right, so that was our first acceleration here in the 2-liter Seltos. So like we already mentioned, we were on that press drive in Texas back in February, and we were driving the SX Turbo. So that's the upper end engine, but most people are going to end up with the lower end engine, which is, you know, what we wanted to sample today, test it out, see how it compares. So this engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, 146 horsepower, 132 pound-feet of torque. You know, and it gets up to speed reasonably well. I mean, it's not gonna knock your socks off or anything. It's pretty much typical for the class. You know, this is not a segment of high-powered vehicles or anything like that.
Certainly not.
But, you know, like I said, it's perfectly adequate.
And, you know, this is pretty much the same engine that's in my Elantra, and it really isn't bad. What I will say about it is that it gets kind of breathless when you get in the high RPM range. It kind of gets slow and breathless, but definitely just cruising around the city, it's definitely, it's perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about that. And as far as the 1.6-liter turbo, if you're just curious, that's 175 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque.
And that can be an option onto the S trim level.
Yeah.
So you can get the S with the turbo as well as the SX.
You know, and getting up to speed here, we're going around 50 miles an hour, and you know, one of the things I was really impressed with the Seltos in Texas was just its ride quality and how it feels a class above this segment of vehicle. You know, going 50 miles an hour, I'll go ahead and get a sound level reading, so you know I'm not lying to you, but yeah, we're looking at around 57 decibels, which is very, very good for this segment. It's very quiet. As I mentioned before, we're going pretty fast, and really just another thing is just the ride quality. You know, it feels very solid in this cabin, and the ride quality is pretty much a class above.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really like about it, is this feels very substantial. Some of the subcompacts, they feel, you know, kind of light, kind of cheap. You know, this feels just as substantial as the class above, like he was saying, in the way that, you know, it all feels like it's one big, nice, cohesive piece. right there is the other powertrain difference from the turbo model, and that's that this 2-liter engine is going to be paired with a continuously variable transmission instead of the 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Honestly, the performance of this CVT though is very nice, just like we experienced in the new Soul, as well as some other Kia and Hyundai products. It's a pretty responsive, continuously variable transmission. It also has shift simulation, as you can see. So as you get into it, you know, it does kind of give you that simulating effect that I do like to see, because that makes it seem a little bit more ordinary and feel a little bit better.
And as far as your drivetrains are going to be concerned, this Seltos, one of its biggest selling points is that every trim level comes standard with all-wheel drive. Besides for this S, this is the only trim that's going to come standard with front-wheel drive. However, you can option on the all-wheel drive system, which is what we have here. So that's just kind of a trim level difference thing, since they wanted to make the S and LX have the same starting price.
They were kind of out on a country back road here. That's not exactly the Seltos' domain, but I am happy to report that it can totally hold its own. This is, for all intents and purposes, has pretty good dynamics, especially for a subcompact crossover. What I particularly like is the steering. It has a really natural and authentic type of feel to it. You know, it does respond immediately. It doesn't have any types of like dead spots or anything like that. You know, and I feel confident in where the wheels are placed, you know, going down just a back road like this. You know, as far as the chassis as well, it is reasonably rigid, so when you go around corners, you have minimal body roll. You know, so while it's certainly not like a sports car or anything like that, it does have good dynamics compared to its rivals.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. The Trailblazer, to me, just sitting from the passenger seat, this feels more composed. We actually drove around the exact same stretch of road.
Yes.
This feels more composed to me than the all-new Trailblazer that just came out.
It does, and the steering definitely has a more natural feel than that model, so I do have more confidence coming down this road.
Now, of course, with every review, we're trying to do slam dunks and airballs about this car's, like, biggest good feature and maybe some of its downfalls. So its slam dunk for this Kia Seltos is just the value that is thrown in on this model. I mean, it's really that way with a lot of new Hyundai Kia products, but this is really an exceptional value for the segment. You have a lot of features, a ton of space, good styling on the outside. They don't make it look like you spent, you know, a cheap amount of money when you go for a lower base trim level, and that's definitely very appreciated in this segment, since a lot of them can make them look really ugly on the outside if you go for a base trim.
Sure. And then as far as the airball, we actually kind of struggled to come up with one, which is a great testament to this vehicle, you know, when you have to really think about it. I guess if we had to come up with something, it would be maybe the continuously variable transmission. You know, a lot of people aren't fans of it. I would prefer to have a traditional transmission, but once again, that's not really unexpected for this class. A lot of times for fuel economy purposes, you do have a continuously variable transmission. And with this, you can get the 7-speed dual clutch if you want to upgrade the engine. So that's kind of the airball, but there's not really a huge con of this vehicle.
And then lastly, I do need to talk about the fuel economy. So for the 2-liter front-wheel drive, that's going to come in at 29 city, 34 highway, 31 combined. If you want to go for all-wheel drive, that's going to be 27 city, 31 highway, 29 combined. And then if you go for that turbo model, that's going to go down 2 from that to 27 combined.
But to conclude, I guess I can just kind of reiterate just a little bit of you know, what you've already heard us say, and that's that this is a vehicle has a lot of positives and not very many negatives. You know, that's always a good sign of something that is one of the best products in the class, when you have trouble thinking of downsides and reasons not to get the Seltos. So I have to say, you know, if you're shopping in this category of vehicle, you have to check out the Seltos, because it is one of the best products in the class.
Alrighty, so of course one of the best things about this Kia Seltos is going to be the price. So it starts at $21,990, and that's going to be for the LX and S trim. So of course, like we mentioned throughout in the previous review, the LX is all-wheel drive standard, and the S is front-wheel drive standard, so that's kind of your difference there. So you can also add an all-wheel drive on the S trim. So we have the S all-wheel drive, and we do also have a few just accessories thrown in. So we have carpet floor mats for $130, an auto-dimming interior mirror for $350, wheel locks for $60, and then when you add the destination charge of $1,120, this particular tester as equipped comes in at $25,150. Which I have to say, I'm very impressed. You know, like we said at the beginning of the video, this we probably think is the best value in the Seltos lineup, because you are getting a ton of equipment for 25 grand, really good exterior styling, and you're not sacrificing that much from that high-end trim level, and definitely a good value in the segment. Well guys, we've enjoyed watching our second review of the 2021 Kia Seltos in this S trim. If you made it this far in the video, hopefully that means you enjoyed it at least a little bit. So be sure to pay us back by hitting that subscribe button down below, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.